He was the kind of person who noticed everything and everyone. It didn't matter what someone was doing across the estate or behind palace walls, he paid attention. People mattered to him, and he made sure they knew it. That same deep awareness, that instinct to understand people before problems began, is exactly what makes this story so fascinating, because long before the world saw headlines, interviews, and controversy, something quiet and incredibly important had already happened behind the scenes. Before Meghan Markle ever stepped into St. George's Chapel in that now iconic wedding, Queen Elizabeth II had already made a calculated move, one that could have completely changed how this entire royal chapter unfolded. And almost nobody saw it, because this wasn't a public gesture. There were no cameras.
No announcements.
Just a decision, and a door quietly opened. The Queen had chosen someone. Not just anyone, but the one woman in the royal family she trusted to guide, protect, and shape Meghan's transition into royal life. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Now, that choice wasn't random. Sophie wasn't the loudest royal. She wasn't the most famous. But she was something far more valuable inside that institution. Steady, loyal, and deeply trusted. She had lived the exact journey Meghan was about to begin. She had stumbled, adapted, learned the unspoken rules, and earned her place over time. In many ways, Sophie was the blueprint. So when the Queen brought them together, it wasn't just a polite introduction. It was an opportunity. The two women met privately. No press. No pressure. Just conversation. And not a short one. They reportedly spoke for hours. Sophie opened up, ready to share everything she had learned. The mistakes, the pressures, the invisible expectations that don't get written into any royal handbook. This could have been the start of a powerful alliance. But something unexpected happened. Meghan didn't step through that door. Instead, she chose a different path, one that didn't include guidance, structure, or gradual adjustment. She believed she had something stronger, her relationship with Prince Harry. And in her eyes, that was enough. Just like that, the Queen's carefully considered plan was quietly set aside. Sophie didn't protest.
She didn't complain.
That's not how she operates. But behind that silence, there was disappointment, because this wasn't just about a missed connection. It was the first signal. A signal that Meghan wasn't interested in adapting to the system. She intended to move differently within it. And inside the royal family, that difference matters more than anything. Not long after, there were more signs. Both Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Sophie reportedly made efforts to reach out again. Quiet gestures, invitations, open lines. But the response remained the same. Distance. To outsiders, it may have seemed small. But within palace walls, this wasn't small at all. It challenged something fundamental, the expectation that new members learn before they lead, observe before they act. And from that point forward, the tone began to shift. What followed wasn't an explosive feud, not at first. It was slower, subtle, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. A missed connection here, an awkward moment there, a silence that lingered just a little too long. And then came the cultural clash. Meghan brought with her a warmth and openness that felt natural to her, hugging, casual conversation, emotional expression. But inside the royal family, especially among senior members like Prince William and King Charles III, those same gestures didn't always land the same way. What felt friendly to Meghan felt unfamiliar and sometimes uncomfortable to them. Something as simple as a hug became a talking point. There were whispers, staff observations, interpretations that may not have been fair, but in that environment, perception quickly becomes reality. And once perception shifts, everything else follows. William, in particular, began to pull back, not out of hostility, but out of caution. There was a growing sense that Meghan didn't fully understand the structure she had entered and, more importantly, didn't want to. Meanwhile, Sophie watched.
Quietly. Carefully.
Because she had seen this before, not the exact situation but the pattern. The early resistance. The refusal to slow down and absorb the system before trying to reshape it. But unlike others, Sophie didn't intervene again. She had already tried. And then came one of the most symbolic and uncomfortable realities of royal hierarchy, the curtsy. When Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex after her marriage in 2018, her rank placed her above Sophie in the royal order, which meant that Sophie, a woman who had spent nearly 2 decades building trust and stability within the monarchy, now had to curtsy to someone who had just arrived. Think about that for a moment. It wasn't just protocol. It was symbolic. Experience bowing to arrival. Loyalty bowing to disruption. Sophie handled it with grace, because that's what she does. But insiders suggest that moment carried weight. Not because of ego, but because of what it represented. And then everything escalated. By early 2020, the cracks were no longer subtle. The announcement that Harry and Meghan would step back from royal duties, what the world later called Megxit, sent shockwaves through the institution. The Commonwealth Day service that followed became one of the most analyzed royal appearances in modern history. No words were needed. The distance between the couples, Harry and Meghan on one side, William and Catherine on the other, was unmistakable. Sophie's presence added another layer. Her neutral expression, her physical distance, her quiet alignment with William and Catherine all told a story without a single sentence being spoken. This wasn't drama for her. This was something she had spent years helping to stabilize, now visibly strained. And just when it seemed things couldn't get more complicated, they did. The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the memoirs. Each moment added pressure. Each revelation pulled the royal family further into public scrutiny. And through it all, Sophie remained the same, silent, steady, committed. But silence doesn't mean absence of feeling. By the time books like Endgame by Omid Scobie were released, filled with claims and criticisms, those close to Sophie suggested something had shifted. Not publicly, but personally. Because this wasn't just about headlines anymore. It was about years of quiet effort being challenged from afar. And yet, while Meghan and Harry were building a new life in California, media deals, brands, and global platforms, Sophie took a completely different route. She leaned deeper into her role. By 2024, she had become one of the most dependable working royals, carrying out hundreds of engagements and supporting the monarchy during one of its most challenging periods.
No rebranding. No reinvención.
Just consistency. And here's where the story takes its most fascinating turn. Because in the beginning, Meghan was the star. The attention, the excitement, the global spotlight, it was all centered on her. Sophie, in comparison, remained in the background. But over time, that dynamic reversed. One chose visibility, the other chose stability. And in an institution built on endurance rather than moments, that difference matters more than anything. Today, Sophie is often described as a bridge within the royal family, someone trusted across generations, someone who supports without overshadowing. And Meghan? She represents something entirely different, a challenge to tradition, a redefinition of what royal life could look like, and perhaps a reminder of what happens when two very different visions collide. Because at its core, this isn't just a story about conflict. It's about two women who entered the same world and chose completely different ways to survive it. One adapted, one resisted, and somewhere in between those choices, a quiet decision made by a queen changed everything.